Hello, it's Tom Donald from the London Contemporary School of Piano. Well, today I'm going to talk about the topic that we all love to hate, sight reading. But the reality is that sight reading, no matter where you're up to in sight reading on the piano, sight reading is something that is not only just a critically important musical skill to have, but sight reading, even just making the smallest improvements on your sight reading, getting it to be 5, 10, 15, 20% better, is going to have a huge positive impact on your playing, on your speed of learning pieces, comprehending music, and just generally moving your musical progression forward. So let's dive in and talk about this all-important topic, sight reading. And if you like our work at the London Contemporary School of Piano, feel free to click the bell button and subscribe to our channel, and therefore you're not missing out on the quality videos and content that we have to offer for you. So, sight reading. Now, today's video, I want to help you master your sight reading. I want to be a little bit ambitious here. I don't just want to get you sight reading 10 or 20% better. I want you to have a little bit of a sight reading revolution in your head, and I want to unblock a few things for you because there's some wider concepts here. So today we're looking at ways to master our sight reading, and not just to master our sight reading, but to master the way we practice sight reading. And the thing about sight reading is it's not just about sitting down with a score in front of us and reading note by rote, verbatim, looking up and down at the music and playing one note at a time. That's a very mechanical process and it's very unmusical. And that's not how we want to sight read. And the reason why most people struggle reading music is that's the way they do it. Now, you wouldn't read a book like that, wouldn't you? You wouldn't just pick up a book and read word by word and not have a comprehension to what the bigger picture is, what it is you're actually reading about, the comprehension of what it is you're reading. And the big problem with musical literacy, it isn't actually the fact that people don't know where notes on the stave are. It's the problem is the comprehension, is they don't understand what's behind the notes. And that's the real problem. You know, some of the best sight readers I've ever come across have actually been conductors that conduct symphony orchestras. And they have the ability quite often, and I've seen this before in rehearsal, to sight read an entire orchestral score, you know, with all of the instruments of the orchestra on this massive score and be able to walk up to a piano and play it. And that's because they have a wider conception and understanding of the music in a harmonic way, in a polyphonic way, in a structural way. And music is a language, and we want to think of it like a language. And often the reason why people struggle and can't read music very well is because they're not treating it like a language, and that's what we're going to do today. Now, there's no one magic formula to crack your sight reading, but I'm going to say that there are 3, and I'm going to show you 3 formulas, and if you tackle sight reading from these angles, I guarantee you're going to make a big result, and you're going to see some big changes in your reading of music. So the first tip, and this first one is more of a conceptual understanding, but it will make a big difference to many of you. So this is looking at sight reading from the keyboard angle, and this is so important. So look at the keyboard down here and look at the notes. You know the notes of the keyboard and you're playing it and you're learning pieces of music. Well, I want you to imagine something about the keyboard right now. I want you to flip the keyboard, literally flip it so the top notes are in the air or up on the sky, and the low notes are down on the floor. So imagine that this is the top notes up at the sky and the low notes down on the floor. Now that is exactly what a musical stave is. A musical stave is basically a keyboard, and it's a keyboard where the top notes are higher up here and the low notes are lower. Sort of makes sense. It's the verticalization of the keyboard, because harmonies and music of a harmonic nature, of a note-given nature, is vertical. And what's horizontal is the rhythm, the movement of rhythm and scales. So that's why we have this notation system designed the way it is, well, the Western notation system. And for most part, it's very effective. It's a very effective way of looking at it. So I have put together a special crib sheet to help you. And if you'd like to get a copy of this crib sheet, please head on over to our website, contemporaryschoolofpiano.com. We will gladly send you this special sight reading crib sheet. Let's have a look at it. So if you remember your first ever piano lesson, or if you remember the first time you learned anything about a piano, I think for many of us, we just learnt where all the C's were, or we learnt where middle C was. So if we play all of the C's on the piano and on the keyboard, they belong in certain positions on the notation. So for instance, this is your middle C, this is your C above middle C, this is your C above that. And notation tends to only work in 3 to 4 octave ranges in both hands. And the reason for that is that you just get too many ledger lines otherwise, and it just gets unreadable. So we have this octave sign. So the charm of the notation system is that we actually only really need to read a few octaves. We're not actually reading every 88 note on the keyboard. Things are then just repeated with the use of the octave up sign and the octave down sign. So if I play this, I get this. And of course, we're not going to be using that many ledger lines very often. And when a composer does that, they almost don't need to do it. They can use the octave sign to save the many, many ledger lines. So it's a real priority, really, just to know this range. And it's actually good if you go to our website and ask for this sheet. It's the sight reading strategy sheet. You can actually, as a little bit of homework, just fill in the gaps and notate the notes in between. And that's a really useful thing to do. It just gives you that wider concept. But this is what it looks like. This is when you notate all of the white keys on the piano, by the way. That's what it looks like. You get all of these ledger lines. So these are the notes in between these C octaves and beyond. You can see how middle C is not entirely in the middle of the piano there. And then when you go down to here, this is the same thing. I've written it out exactly the same notes, but I've used an octave sign just to make it a little bit more accessible to read. So it continues moving through all of the white keys on the keyboard. Now, there are many variations you can conceptualize with this as well. You could actually notate all of the notes on the keyboard in different scales. So this is like a C major scale, but you could do the same thing for D major, and you can find all of the Ds on the musical staff with the notes in between, following the D major scale. You could do the same thing for the E major scale, the F major scale, and so forth. The purpose of this exercise, the reason why we're doing this, is to translate the keyboard conception into the notation conception. So if you'd like to have a copy of that crib sheet, it's just a nice thing to hang up on your wall, put near your piano. It just gives you that conception of the way you need to readdress your thinking in comparison to the keyboard. The vertical concept of the harmony and of the notes written on the musical stave. And so that is one little angle that it's a conceptual angle that can make a huge difference to your understanding of reading musical notation on the piano. Here's the second one. And this is I'm going to use a very useful piano method book to demonstrate this sight reading method. And this method is the Bartók Microcosmos method. And it's a lovely bunch of books that the composer Bela Bartók put together. But I'm not just talking about these books, I'm talking about the approach. It's the approach that really, really matters. And so this method works really, really well, but it only works well, again, if it's in combination with some of the other methods that I'm going to be talking about. And it is a very powerful method. And for those of you who particularly have a good ear, but you don't read music so well, this is a very good method because you can't really rely on your ear to do some of the cover-up work for you. You actually have to read everything. So the purpose of this method is to not think about individual notes, is not to look at the score here and go, oh, that's a C, or that's a D, or that's an E, and so on. The purpose of this method is to think about patterns and shapes. And really, that's what good sight reading is about. It's about thinking in patterns and shapes. So for instance, the only note we have to think about is the starting note. And in the right hand, I'm playing a C, above middle C with my thumb. And I can use that C axiom handout to figure out where all the C's are in these notation examples. And the left hand, I'm using the C below middle C. And these are unison melodies, so that means both hands are doing the same thing. So the thing I need to think about now is not C, D, E, F, G. I just need to think about two things, up or down. Now later on, when the more advanced patterns turn up in this book, I need to think about other things like skipped notes and repeated notes and different things happening in both hands. But let's just do this as a starting point. Let's think of the notes going up or down, because that's what happens in musical melodic phrases. Notes either go up or down or repeat or jump around a little bit inside the scale often as well. So let's have a look at this exercise and not think about individual notes, but think about patterns and shapes. So we have the first note, up, 2, 3, 4, up, down, 2, 3, 4, up, down, 2, 3, 4. And let's do the next one. Next one has more quarter notes, so it goes a little bit faster. It starts in the same hand position. Up, down, up, down, up, down, down. So if you are to practice through a method book, such as the Bartók Microcosmos, you're not guided by knowing what the melody's meant to sound like. The only thing you have to go by are the patterns. And a really important tip when you play through this repertoire is don't look at your hands. At all costs, avoid looking at your hands. Just get your hands into the right position to start with first. So you can write down on the music the starting note. You can give yourself a bit of a clue. But once you've got that starting note, what you're meant to do is you're meant to see the melody as a shape, as a pattern, as notes that ascend and descend and that repeat or skip, that are creating musical patterns, because that's what a melody does. And I think actually singers seem to understand this better often than pianists. Pianists can get too abstract about notes and think of notes as, individual entities that don't have a connection to other notes. And that's a real risk. If that's the way you think, it's going to make reading very, very hard. Now, if you're still on this video, if you're still with me, you're about to be super rewarded by the third approach I'm going to show you, because when you put the first and the second approach with the third approach, some real magic can start to begin. And it goes back to what I was talking about with conductors being such great sight readers often. Understanding the deeper concepts of what's happening in the music. And the piece of music I'm going to refer to is the famous C Major Prelude by J.S. Bach. Now, sight reading, again, as I said before, is not about note after note after note after note after note, going C, E, G, C, E, G, C, E, and reading like that. I mean, it's just impossible to sound musical if that's how you see sight reading. So what is the deeper concept behind the music? Well, one of the most important things to consider on the piano is chords and harmony, because all of the music we listen to on piano is built on chords and harmony. And if you have a deeper understanding of what is happening harmonically with the music, reading the notes becomes much more palatable. So for instance, if I even just analyze what's happening in this piece, in every bar in the left hand, we only have two notes. And it repeats. I'm just playing the left hand. And the right hand consists of three notes, which forms more of this chord. The first bar being a C major chord, the second bar being a D minor chord, the third bar being a G7 chord. When you add the left hand, it turns into a chord. So if I play this piece entirely by putting all the notes together and treating it like a chord, the whole piece is really just a collection of chords. So by understanding a little bit about the chord system, even if it's just the bare minimum, knowing our major and minor triads, for instance, and using our reading skills just to understand the starting and ending point of the chords or the intervals between them, all of a sudden, reading turns into something like this. As opposed to this. Note, 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 note. I'm now just thinking C major. I can even write it on the music. This is not a test, right? Great concert pianists and great musicians, when they're practicing, they scribble on their music. They write this down. They write above the stave the fingerings they want to use, but they also write down things like, what are the harmonies that are taking place? Things to just give them that assistance, that understanding, to confirm that deeper understanding. On the first bar, we have a C major chord. Second bar, a D minor 7 with a C in the bass. Then a G7 with a B in the bass. Then a C major. Then an A minor starting on a C. Then a D7 with a C in the bass. Then a G major with a B in the bass. Then a C major 7 with a B in the bass. Then an A minor 7. Then a D7. Then a G major chord. Then a G diminished chord. And if you're learning this piece, or you would like to learn this piece, if you head on over to our website, contemporaryschoolofpiano.com, and ask for our special sight reading pack, we will send you the lead sheet of Bach's C Major Prelude. We will send you these, let's say, DNA clues of the music, because Bach didn't just think of this piece of music as a bunch of isolated notes. He didn't get his quilted pen out one day and go, okay, I'm going to write a C, and then I'm going to put an E above it. And then, what should I put above that? Oh, a G. He's thinking about harmony. He's painting colours with major and minor chords. And if you're not taking the time to even understand this vocabulary, the systems of major and minor chords, if you can't recognise these connections of chords, sight reading becomes so difficult, because you're reading all of the notes in isolation. And that's why at the London Contemporary School of Piano, we put a big emphasis on learning chords and harmony at the piano. Not just because it sounds great for playing popular music and jazz, it actually also suits learning classical music much better. All of the great classical composers were fully trained and fully aware and obsessed by the movement of harmony in music. Harmony has been around in classical and Western music for centuries and centuries, and it's such a useful thing to tap into to understand the depths of our notation system. So, and this doesn't just apply to a piece like the C Major Prelude by Bach. I'm going to show you one other piece of music where thinking in chords is also paramount. And this piece needs almost no introduction at all. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the first movement. And again, this piece is built entirely off broken chords, harmonies, arpeggios. And if we just cover the first few bars here, what I've done on this sheet music is I've added above the chords the name of each chord taking place. And of course, I'm using modern notation methods for this. You can use traditional notation methods as well, such as Roman numerals, albeit how you'd like to do it. But by having an understanding of what the shapes and the chords are, all of a sudden, the the notes all make sense in combination. And you can focus on what really matters, and that's playing with musicianship, clarity, and not chasing every single individual note as if it's some sort of horrible sight reading examination. And so this is really important. And again, you can just with the power of a pen and your paper, you can just write down the chords above each change that occurs in the music and create these harmonic analysis of these pieces of music. And it makes such a huge difference to your sight reading. It will revolutionize the way you look at music. All of a sudden, you're not hunting for each individual note. You're actually learning how to understand the deeper construction of the music. And that's going to pay off massive dividends on your sight reading. So if you enjoyed today's tutorial, head on over to our site, contemporaryschoolofpiano.com, and ask for our sight readers kit. It will have a couple of the wonderful resources we've covered today, and it will really help you take those big, bold next steps in your musical journey. It's been lovely seeing you, and I look forward to seeing you on our next tutorial. Bye-bye.